Hey, hello! This is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Wow, so today we have Marigo Raftopoulos, and I hope that I got that last name right. So Marigo, are you prepared to engage?
Oh, I certainly am. And yes, you pronounced my name very well. Thank you for that.
So yes, Marigo is strategic business advisor specializing in innovation using games, gamification, and experience design. And she's the founder and CEO of Strategic Innovation Lab, and is also the advisor to several technology incubators and technology startups. She's also the advisor to the European Commission's Advanced Digital Gaming and Gamification Program. She works with a wide range of global clients on accelerating innovation using the tools of engagement that are fundamental to game design and gamification. She's been focusing over the last few years on transformation projects applying gamification to the fintech, banking, and insurance industries. She holds a PhD in enterprise gamification and has widely published research on gamification frameworks and methodologies. Her research identified design, taxonomic, and capability elements of gamification that have contributed to exemplary project developments. These findings have enhanced critical understanding of the effective design and best practice implementation of enterprise gamification. So, absolutely impressive, Dr. Marigo Raftopoulos. Is there anything I missed in that intro?
Oh, God, no, I don't think so. I think that's about it. I think I should have just summarized that in terms of I'm so enthusiastic about what we can learn from games and game thinking to change the world. So that's probably a better summary of my experience, I
so,
think.
so that's something you share with all of us, the engagers over here. And the first thing we would like to know, Marigo, is what would a regular day with Dr. Marigo look like?
God, I really don't know how to answer that one because every day is so different, and a lot of it depends on whether because I do travel a lot. I do a lot of work overseas as well. So, if it's a typical day whilst I'm sort of on the road and traveling, I think it's very different. A lot of that is about meeting people all the time. So I almost barely touch my laptop and because it's always meeting and engaging with people. And a lot of the time it's just other running workshops. So, I've got sort of a methodology, which I'll probably sort of talk about later in terms of running those workshops. So very often before the workshops, I'm madly shopping for different sort of quirky things to use during workshops as material that I sort of gather together, put it in parcels, that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of
And I
fun work in
completely
terms of pulling.
testify to that. In
Yes,
Gamification Europe, you made some magic tricks, and suddenly some balloons showed up
balloons
in our
showed up out of
tables.
nowhere. That's right, exactly. And then when I'm not in sort of client facing or workshop or traveling mode, a lot of it is in like deep analysis. So in terms of the research that's done, we've collected the data from either the games or either the material that used to develop the games or the experiences. It's deep analysis. So it's sort of sitting alone in front of my laptop or sort of spreading all the material around me. Very often it's taking that material outside into the wider world. I had a wonderful interview with some of the founders of a certain game company, and they told me that they didn't understand why people in gamification were looking to games for great experiences, because what game developers do, they immerse themselves in real life, in what normal everyday people do, and find the magic in that. So I took heart from that a few years ago. It's in terms of finding the magic in what everyday experiences people have. So I'm often an observer of life and experiences in different countries. So I'm often sort of exploring in museums and galleries and parks and just
Wow.
cityscapes and sort of seeing observing what people are doing and when they're smiling and when they're happy or when they're engaging with their children or with each other, and finding those magic moments, because that's what game developers actually do. They find the magic in real life and put them into games.
I have to say that's definitely the first time that we've heard that, at least in this podcast, and it's an actually amazing thing to think of, because it's not only looking at the games, and many people say in gamification that some like games a lot, others say that they don't don't engage in video games or games very much, but this is a new angle from where to tackle all these things, and I find it very interesting. So thanks for that.
Oh, it is. Oh, absolutely. No, it really sort of made me stop and think very deeply about what we were doing. So I think it was the best advice I ever got.
That's beautiful. The next question that we have is there any like favorite fail that you've had? Is there anything that maybe the experience where you failed and that's led you to a future success, or anything that you feel that we can learn, any failure that we can learn from that you lived in first person?
Yes, yeah, I won't name the company, but it
Fantastic.
was, that's great, that's right. You don't want to be sued, do you now? Uh, so yeah, they wanted to develop and this was probably sort of fairly on in my career, and it happened this one time, and it was, I often get, sort of have to sort of think about sort of what this experience led to, and I sort of try and sort of always pull back, is when you're working with a client and they have their own ideas of what a certain game should look like, and you sort of as a consultant, you don't want to sort of, well, in those days, I thought, well, you need to hear what the clients have to say. And I'm a big believer in listening to the people who own and have and live with the problem before you sort of develop a solution. But it was an innovation project, and the game they had their heart set on was a racing car game. And, I advised them in terms of racing cars and innovation. Shouldn't we have something that's more collaborative rather than first past the post? But, they sort of wanted to go ahead with that. They saw a racing car game, and their view was, their strategy was, me too. We want that kind of game, even though it was a completely different organisation and a different problem that they was trying to solve. So we went along with it. I mean, the process of unpacking the problem and developing sort of using a collaborative approach towards developing the game used the same approach, but the outcome was really driven by a picture they had at the end of their mind in terms of what the game or the game experience should look like. And that sort of upset the process a little bit, because if you don't start with a completely open approach and have a completely open mind, people will have a certain agenda and drive down towards a certain track. So whilst I could see that, I could see the power play that was evident. There were certain, influential people in the organisation that wanted this. And, I, let that run. So, okay, the customer knows best. Let's run with that. And it was too hard to deal with the politics of trying to change this very senior person's mind in terms of the type of game that they wanted to play. So hence we produced a racing car game for this innovation project. And everybody thought, yeah, the game was a success because everybody loved to play it. But then once the hype died down, it's like, yeah, but what's the innovation angle in this? And then the floodgates opened. Great game, we spent a lot of money, but how is it going to make us innovative again? Can you just tell us that? So, so everyone was ducking for cover after that. So that was sort of the worst experience I had, and I learned a lot from that in terms of what true open-mindedness about a problem is and what true collaboration really means, and also allowing the problem to speak to you rather than sort of try and corner it too much.
Yeah, we've talked about this with the engagers more than once, saying and remembering the importance of simply understanding really deeply what your problem is, what your engagement problem is, what you're looking for with whatever solution you're trying to design. And of course, never start with a solution in mind, actually start with a problem in mind and build a solution around that. And I think that would be my key takeaway from your experience. What would you say is in a sentence or two, is your key takeaway from that experience, Marigo?
From that experience is, apart from keeping a completely open mind about what the problem is and what the potential solution should look like, but a lot of it is actually managing the internal expectations of an organisation or the clients in terms of what they believe or think an optimal solution is, because very often a client will most likely start with a solution in mind, and it's very difficult to get them to let go of that and be open to a very open and collaborative approach to problem finding and solution development.
Definitely. So in your experiences, engagers, if it's perhaps more towards a classroom, towards a university, your school, there's that there's also some politics involved. There's some people who hold the power, and there's some people who make decisions, and you have to also play that game. You have to know that game's out there, and that you have to, in a way, you're playing it every day. But maybe now think more deeply about it. If you want to create something new for your class, it's something that you have to consider as well. So consider all those people that are influential in the organization as well. And now,
Absolutely.
yeah. And now I would like to shift completely now. Instead of going for the worst experience, I would like to shift and ask you, what is the biggest challenge that you've had and actually solved using either gamification, game thinking, however you want to look after it?
Well, the biggest challenge I'm facing is right at this moment, and I can't say that we've solved it yet, but I'm loving the process in terms of trying to unpack it. So I'm working for a private client, private investors who have invested in a new cryptocurrency. So now we're sort of preparing for the ICO, which is the initial coin offering, and also how do we engage with potential buyers of this crypto coin. And so it's been a real challenge because public knowledge or awareness of cryptocurrency is very minimal at the moment, and there's a lot of misunderstanding of what it is and how it can be used, and there's lots of different markets. So you're looking at so we're building profiles of potential buyers or investors in cryptocurrency, and because we're starting with very little information base, so rarely sort of in the projects that I've had so far, or in any project where you're dealing with an innovative product, your base knowledge is quite minimal. Like, who are the buyers? What are they thinking? We're making a lot of estimates, so there's a lot of original research going into sort of building those buyer profiles. And at the moment, they're looking to be very different, very distinct, and having some of those commonalities are being really difficult to find at the moment. So in terms of, some people say, well, but what are the engagement tactics we're going to use? Are we going to use games and experiences? I'm like, unless we understand who it is that we want to engage with and what is it that they currently understand, what do they know, and where are they going to learn about what crypto is before we offer our own product out there, we really will be shooting in the dark. And I know we have to start somewhere, but it's been a fantastic challenge because we're dealing with a new product that is it's so innovative and so leading edge at the moment in terms of sort of what's happening in the financial market and currency market. It's exciting me deeply at the moment. So yeah, but once again, haven't solved it quite yet, but I think I'm very confident in the approach that we're using.
So this ties quite well into the next question, and it would be, what is that process that you use to follow when you want to apply gamification to a certain situation, like the one that you just mentioned, or maybe another one. But what's the usual project? Actually, not project. The actual process that you follow if you're going to tackle a situation through gamification.
Yeah, I have a process that I've evolved over time, and also that evolved out of my PhD research, which I finished about sort of 12 months ago, almost 2 years ago now. It's called the Gamification Design Sprint. So what this does is it has a deep methodology, and this it's similar methodologies of design sprints that that Google operates and a lot of other sort of big organisations. But I've adapted that process into looking what is the best process that we have in terms of how people design products, experiences, processes, etc. So the process, the gamification design sprint is a whole process that goes through different phases, but it actually gives people gaps in time as well. So rather than run a single workshop and from that single workshop you pull out the materials, we have sessions where this can run over 1 or 2 weeks preferably. So we run a session and it all starts with sort of problem definition, unpacking the problem, looking at sort of how the system works. So a big part of this is using systems thinking just as much as games thinking, and perhaps more importantly so, to see how the overall system of what it is of the problem that we're trying to look at, understanding very deeply who are the players and what are the systemic constraints of the industry or the process that we're looking at. And then you sort of give gaps over time. So we make assumptions and make a hypothesis during the workshop session, and then we leave half a day or a week between that so we can go out and find the facts, and we build artifacts. So there's a lot of visual thinking. Post-it notes we use, but we actually build models of the problem and then sort of eventually build models of the solutions. And that's so what it is right from the day one. You are building a visual model of not only the problem but the eventual solution. So you can actually visually track how that problem and the solution evolves over a week or two, depending on how much time we've set aside for the design sprint.
That's fantastic. That's very interesting. Marigo, is there anything else you would like to add from that challenge that you're facing right now, or from your process that you would like the engagers to stay with?
I think it's building visual representations. It gets a different level of engagement from people. Like with most projects, I go through an interview phase just to find out exactly from people what is their perception of the problem and what do they think the solution may be. So when you're talking to people, the talking is a great skill that humans have, but the original skill that humans had was building things and building models and replicas and drawings and things like that. So as part of the especially the problem definition phase and potential solution development phase, is to use visual representation of what the conversations are right from the very beginning, because you can see it in the face of the people that you are working with. The minute you ask them to build a model, you can use Lego. I use other materials that sort of architects and engineers use in terms of building models. As they start to build, they see different things in what it is that they're trying to say, as do you as well. And you get a 360 picture of the problem by using visual representation of the conversations and the workshops that you have.
Yeah, definitely. So visual thinking, so to speak,
Absolutely.
and taking things to a visual level, to a visual representation, is something that can be very useful to not only express it to others, which is fundamental and it's very important, but even to get your ideas outside of your head. In my personal experience, I've realized that thing that they talk about a lot of journaling and that stuff, the main idea behind this is not whether you write well or you don't write well or somebody else is going to read, which is also important, but it's getting the ideas outside of your head so that in a way they stop tormenting your head. You put them down somewhere and see if they make sense. When you read them, when you visualize them, you can maybe see if they still make sense, and you can show it to somebody else and see if it makes sense. And it helps express what you're saying and taking it again outside of your head and trying to build something with that. And that's something that's very human. And I to be honest, in my experience, I've found it very, very useful as well.
Absolutely. Agree totally.
So, Marigo, in this second part of the interview, we move into sort of, I like to call them the quick answers, the quick tools, tips, and tactics. It doesn't mean that you can't expand on any of them, but the idea here is to grab, again, ideas, tools, tactics that we can use in our everyday creation, or maybe for the first time if you're going to design something that can be almost immediately used, or something that you can start doing almost immediately. So the first one I would like to know is if there is anything that you would name as a best practice in the gamification space.
Yes, I think people who have went to Gamification Europe will know that my big thing, the best practice at the moment, I think, is systems thinking. I think that's really important for anyone interested in any form of engagement development.
That's fantastic, and that's very important. I've seen the growth in the amount of people actually talking about this around the game design and the gamification designers thinking every time a bit more about the systems thinking, and I think you're definitely one of the pioneers in that, and I hope you do lead the way for the rest of us in that sense.
Oh, definitely will. Absolutely.
And changing it a bit, what's your favorite game, Marigo?
Not that I've played very much of it lately, but World of Warcraft, in terms of a beautifully put together virtual world that has thought about everything, from just engagement and from sort of leveling, and also because of the economist in me, just sort of I marvel at the virtual economy that they've built in that. So to me, it's a masterful piece of work.
Is there anything that you would like to like point out of why you love that design? And I'm not speaking just of the visual design, but the design of the game in general. Is there anything you'd like to highlight?
The leveling system, as frustrating as it appears to be, I just think it's a very complex one. But it's if it's to me, in terms, if you go back to how people, real or humans, learn in real life, it's the learning process that's been so beautifully woven into World of Warcraft.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's the next question, and it's who would you like to listen to interviewed in Professor Game?
And it's probably outside the game space, if that's sort of if that's okay. I was thinking deeply about it, and you're probably going to go, oh no, here she goes again. But probably someone from the systems thinking domain. Peter Senge is just, I mean, he's not sort of active in this space at all, but I think talking to some of the pure system thinkers who would almost be surprised that people are looking, or they probably won't be surprised that you're looking at games, because a game is a complete closed loop system. So I think when you sort of talk about some of the founders of and leading thinkers that have been around sort of for a very long time in systems dynamics and systems thinking, and I'm happy to get a list for you. I think it would be extremely interesting to hear from them how systems or closed loop systems work, and I think that will give us as gamification practitioners an insight into the engine room of a system, of which is, and I think very often from everything that I've read and people that I've met with in gamification, I don't think we very often look behind the engine and sort of see how it's actually put together from a systems perspective. So I think that would be sort of a very valuable interview. So that's
Can
what
you
I would
repeat the
recommend.
name of the person?
Look, I'd say that there's a lot more. I won't sort of give a name. I'll give you a list of
Okay,
names,
sure.
and I can, but definitely someone from that systems thinking domain.
That sounds fantastic. Is there any book that you would recommend to our listeners, whether in gamification or systems thinking, that you think would help us in the process of creating a gamification environment, especially in education, which is one of the main areas of interest of the audience?
Yes, I think from a like a general systems view, probably the fifth discipline. Now that book has been around for quite a while, and I only recently reread it, and I'm just amazed at how relevant it is today. And I would recommend that for everyone, including people who learn, because the whole sort of center around the fifth discipline is not about understanding how systems work, but about how systems and how people learn inside those systems. So I think for people who are in working in learning and education, I think it's really important to understand those aspects. But also they have a big section in there on organisational learning, about learning in general, and how for us to sort of look at a different future. How do we design for a future that is new, that's different, and very challenging? They have the form of adaptive learning and the techniques and the strategies that we need to do. So a lot of it is about unlearning how we've currently came here, and in order to develop a new way of learning about how do we now view our systems in a very different way than what we have before. So learning is at the core of any sort of systems thinking approach, because it's about unlearning and relearning.
Yeah, this is something actually I think we touched, even though briefly, upon in gamification Europe about this. Well, you expanded on it on your talk about the systemic problems, and I mentioned it as well as the problem that might be in as a system in education. There's many things that are going on that I would rather think that can be changed and that can be improved for the better. I'm not saying everything that just because it's old or it's been going on for many years, it's wrong. I just think that the system, as hard as it is to change such a huge thing as education, there's many things that I think we don't have to just dump technology on top of what we're doing right now, but rather think how and what do we want people to learn, and how is it going to be useful and relevant. I mean, just like in gamification, if you create something for your users, you think about your users, you think about where you want to take them, what's the journey you want them to go through, and what's the objective, where do you want to lead them. And I'm not sure that we've thought that through once again recently for the educational system, and I'm talking like basic, like elementary to higher education. There's many things that I'm sure that we could rethink and we could improve massively, or even completely change and make it more relevant, as you're saying, to the future and to how we learn, and to what are going to be the abilities and the things that we need in the future as a society and as individuals as well.
Yes, exactly. And there's lots of great thinkers in this space as well, which is really exciting to see. So in terms of, apart from fifth discipline, in terms of its sort of more holistic and overview over the whole thing, specifically Prinsky and James Paul Gee has done some beautiful work in the whole sort of games and games for learning space. And I think Gee's work is just so magnificent in terms of the notion that sort of sticks with me is the whole affinity space when one creates in learning, and how sort of games and play is a part of that. But if you just sort of think of that beautiful phrase, affinity space, and that all of a sudden it changes everything in terms of how you perceive your learners and the material that it is that you're teaching them or facilitating learning of. It just, even just changing the names of what it is that we do as teachers and educators, starts to sort of have a bit of a ripple effect in terms of how you start to view everything it is that you do, and how we could sort of rethink that.
Yeah.
So that were the other two books that I would add to that.
Definitely. So the next question is, what do you consider is your superpower when you talk about gamification? Where's your sweet spot?
For me, it's definitely in the explorer phase. So whilst I know explorer is a type in some ways, but I think I'm a great. That's my biggest superpower is exploring. So I can explore into like sort of worlds unknown, whether they are sort of the problem world or the solution world. I sort of delve deep. So I ask the why, and look in using sort of all the other superpowers that goes with that, sort of intuition and courage and fearlessness and things like that. And I suppose it's easy to do that as a consultant, because you're not sort of part of the problem. But I always find that sort of when you have got that sort of explore and you have the courage to sort of go into that sort of explore mode, you do frighten the pants off your clients, but they also thank you afterwards as well, because someone has to do it, and very often it doesn't come from within inside an organization, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely, and it goes along very well for somebody who went for a PhD, and you have to be very curious to find out about new things and do research.
Yeah, and a touch crazy as well.
The next question that we have, this is a question I'm going to pick right now. Well, not pick, it's going to come up randomly from questions that we've received from the audience, but I can promise you that they've been checked before they arrive here, so it's not going to be a random question. So
Okay.
let's get it here, and here we have a science teacher. This is a very brief question in which she has, and might be a bit broad, so however you want to tie it together and to bring it to something a bit more concrete, please feel free. So she's a science teacher. She's a chemistry teacher. And she's asking how would be like the first thing that you would try and attempt in a science class with kids. What's something that you would do to help them get more engaged with the classroom, with the class that she would be teaching in a chemistry? I think she says here it's 7th grade. So, well, but 7th grade is just as good as 6th or 8th. So somewhere around that. Is there any recommendations you would give her to get started? This sounds like a teacher that she's never tried any gamification in her classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I would try with rather than go into well, I know where I'd like her to lead up to, but I think initially with the material, it's like things that are very tactile, particularly for with that year level and with that topic. It's quite sort of it can be quite esoteric until they actually start to work with experiments and things like that, which is standard and all very good. But I'd like to see them engage with actually tactile things. So like get them to work with the art teacher, for example, and get them to build a model of molecules or something like that. So if you get the kids to actually build the molecules and see what that actually looks like, and this is where I love the new phase of how learning develops, is that I'd love to see the science teacher work with the art teacher to not only sort of visualize it, but to get the kids to build molecules and then in science get to put them together in ways that can actually teach the material that it is that we want to build. So I would definitely start with that, sort of have this union between art and science, because at the end of the day, that's what games are, that combination of art and science. And then eventually, depending on how they go, playing those citizen science games, and there's a lot of them at the moment, and obviously the most famous one is Folded. Folded is designed for even very young kids to actually play as well, as long as they just enjoy puzzle making or whatever it is that they will actually sort of engage with that material. So I would really love them to start with a tactile first, because that is the most human response, and then to actually see how it works in a digital game. So say by the end of the year or at the end of that particular subject would be a beautiful, well-rounded experience for them.
That sounds beautiful. Thank you very much. So I hope that we answered the question of this teacher. Lastly, Marigo, do you have any final quick advice for our listeners, especially those who have never engaged their learners or their clients using gamification? Is there any final piece of advice you would like to leave them with?
I think it's just embrace humanity. And I think we tend to lose a lot of that because we're so seduced by technology at the moment, as technology has caused problems or technology is going to solve problems. I think a lot of it lies in the human heart. And I think re-engaging with people in a true and meaningful way is the answer to not only a lot of the problem solving, but also how do we in terms of, it gives us the main impetus to start sort of solving the problems in a really sort of sustainable way. And I think you see a lot of, humans are left on the sidelines, like, oh, AI is going to take over everything. So we almost sort of talked ourselves into oblivion. And I think a lot of the problems that we have at the moment is because we have listened to people or truly engage them in a way that is meaningful. So, I know sort of, like I said, one of the chapters in my book is called Reality is Beautiful. And I think that's where we really need to start positioning ourselves is don't get so carried away that games have the answer to everything. We as people have the answers to what it is that we need to do. And I think once we start engaging with ourselves in a meaningful way, and that is actually not an easy thing to do, because I don't believe that we have been taught as people how to meaningfully engage with other people. So I think if you start sort of saying, so how do I engage with people and how can I better engage with that? Not only will you solve half your problems, which is sort of what actually happens in my workshops after we sort of unpack all the problems, in the process of designing something, they realize what they're doing wrong in a normal everyday sense that's actually created those problems. So starting with humans first, we're really going to make a lot more traction in problem solving and eventually building games that are just magnificent and beautiful to play.
That's beautiful. Last thing, Marigo, is how can we connect with you? And then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Well, email's usually best because I work in all time zones, so I never really know where I'm going to be. So Marigo at strategicinnovationlab.com. So I think you'll, they can contact me through you if they need be. But, always happy to chat to anyone because to me, it's engaging with people and what they're working on that I think is most exciting.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much once again, Marigo, for giving us all these insights, all these golden nuggets. And it's time to say game over.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Engagers, it's fantastic to have you around. This podcast only makes sense with you. So let's connect on Twitter so you can let me know who would you like to have as a guest on Professor Game. Amazing people such as Marigo Raftopoulos are available to chat with us. My Twitter account is @RobAlvarezB. Let's get the conversation started. I'm always sharing content on gamification and especially around education. Hey, wait. Don't click continue yet. Do you want to know how Ahmad Hossam lost 26,000 points in his own gamification design? Listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there!